Copper is a very beautiful metal. When you lift it up, it makes a noise. You know, it talks to you in a way. It's kind of alive. You can see on its scratches the manufacture of handling that's already gone through, that are already markings of a kind and part of its own history. Sometimes you can even use what has already happened to the copper. The water won't stick where the grease is, and they'll be revealed like fingerprints are revealed. Sometimes when you're trying to get in the mood to work, you'll pick up a sheet of copper and you'll reflect the room in it or the environment, and you'll get ideas for shapes. If you bend the copper, the shapes distort and change. And already there's a total reproduction of your environment in the copper. It's picked up what's around you, including yourself. Other kind of things I think about before I work. I'm waiting for the muse to come down and inspire me. A little music. The medium itself is an old traditional one, but I think I use it in a more free manner. This is different than, say, the idea of starting from very pure materials, where you clean completely the copper so that no accidents can occur. But if you accept the idea of accidents, I think it's more interesting, to me anyway. I approached the medium from the point of view of trying to see what enamel would do and what you could do to it that was more inherent to its quality as a granular powder, like sand. Because it's a powder, it can be handled like sand, and you can do to it what nature does to sand. Nature is modifying sand and dirt. In fact, our surroundings are mostly variations of some kind of sand. And nature is continually modifying the appearance of this material with water, with wind, with erosion, with scratching, with temperature, with explosions, pushing it, pressing it, pulling it. And it seems to me that because I'm working with this material which looks like sand and acts like sand, I should be able to handle it like sand can be handled, not necessarily like paint should be handled. Because it's not a paint, it doesn't like to be brushed, although you can brush it. If I want to get, and I like the brush, if I want to get a brush effect, I'll usually use something more fluid like water to take the memory of the brush stroke. You can blot with it. You can use another surface and blot the forms. And having picked up that blotted form, reblot it somewhere else is a form of printing. And you can use it in reference to gravity too, by dropping, dribbling, splashing, picking up one side of the piece, allowing it to drain. And all of this can be very carefully picked up again by the enamel, by dusting the enamel over these wet surfaces where you've had a great deal of freedom and fluidity. And the enamel then falls onto these wet areas and reproduces what you did in the water. And this happens in nature too. On the beach you'll see it, you know, on the boardwalk if there's some water and the sand comes along and hits the water, and you'll get an impression of the water. I don't mean to say that this should be a rule, that if you can find it in nature, you can do it. I don't think it makes any difference what you do. in terms of technique, as long as you're doing something that you want to do and you can get an effect that you want. I'm very interested in nature and what happens in nature. I like the things that is reflected in nature, like in mud puddles or in water, or in the eyes of animals you see reflections. And enamel has this potential. I'm not trying to imitate nature, but I think I'm trying to use the same processes that occur in nature in order to get a wider vocabulary of expression. The firing is a complete separate step. It comes at the point when you've decided there's nothing much else you're going to do to the surface, and you want to see what's going to happen when it fuses. Of course, a lot of things can happen at that point. There is a certain amount of control. The temperatures you go up to, for instance, will affect the color and the texture of the material. You heat it to a cherry red, about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less. All the binding material, the organic matter that's maybe there by accident or by intention, then burns out completely and disappears. The water that you so carefully put in patterns and forms all becomes volatilized, leaving only the enamel to fuse to the metal. When the enamel's been fired, you lift it off and you put it on a smooth surface and you roll it out with a rubber roller. It's at this point that you can watch the oxidation patterns forming from in the cooling, as certain parts of the oxidation will pop off. They're accidental effects that you get, and you sometimes utilize them. They tend to halo enameled areas. That is, a fused area of enamel will be surrounded by a darker patch of oxidation, which sometimes can be used as an accentuating element. At this point, the thing has a life completely of its own. You can't affect it. The person involved in an art form is involved with the medium to a great extent, and he can only say things through that medium. But he may not even be saying something. He may be just leaving a track, a record. His intention may not be to communicate ideas or to even communicate feelings or communicate anything at all, but merely to exist in relationship to these materials. It's something like the way the Indians used to track animals, you know. They could spot a broken twig here and a crushed leaf there, and they could know exactly what happened, say, in the last 3/4 of an hour. I think we've developed a kind of, not a language, but a interest. People who are interested in art have developed a kind of a system of tracking where they, the slightest nuance of handling of the material gives them not messages, but attitudes. It has to do with just being, existing. So in my work, I intend for it not to be a message. It's not doesn't tell anybody anything. And if anything, it's merely an object which I have made, which I want to see later, and I want to have a certain feeling from, or want to be near it. If it doesn't do that, then I throw it away.